everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports, where we cover sports from a spectator's point of view. This is episode number 120, and before we get into the content, please do us a massive favor, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps this channel grow, reach a broader audience. And if you want to get clips from today's episode or past episodes, we just recently dropped a reaction video to the Daniel Jones release from the New York Giants. You want to go check that out, I'll link it in the description, as well as our past clips are here on YouTube as well as on TikTok. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio experience, we got that for you too on Spotify. I'll link everything in the description, and let's get into this week's episode. Thanksgiving is around the corner, and man, am I thankful for Saquon Barkley. The Philadelphia Eagles, at least the 2024 edition of the Philadelphia Eagles, is kind of like a boxer, where in the first quarter, in the first couple of rounds in a boxing match, you figure out what your opponent likes to do. You have a couple test punches, but then as the game wears on, you wear down your opponent and you eventually knock them out. And that's basically the formula of the 2024 Eagles, where they can be had in the first few scripted plays, and we saw the Rams move the ball quite well, especially in the first part of the first half at least. Eventually, the Eagles kind of settled down. Their number one defense answered the bell and clamped down on a pretty talented Rams team, especially at the wide receiver position, and Matthew Stafford is a future Hall of Famer, but they were able to make him hold on to the ball because he's a guy that gets the ball out so fast, but the Eagles managed to sack Matthew Stafford 4 times in this game. And talking about that knockout punch, it is Saquon Barkley. I mean, Saquon Barkley takes the Eagles to a different dimension. Right after being right there with the Eagles in the first half, it was 13-7 going into halftime. On the first play of scrimmage in the second half, Saquon rips off a 70-yard touchdown run to put them up 20-7. And that was really the tone in the second half, where Saquon is going to get his 9-yard runs, but then bust out a major long gain. And it felt like the Rams were just playing catch-up drive after drive, and they had to play perfect. They had to get in Jalen's face when they were on passing downs, which they did a couple of times, but Jalen honestly navigated the pressure pretty well. And honestly, the Great Wall of Philadelphia with Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, and Lane Johnson, I mean, that's 5 very beefy men. And to have them pave the lanes for Saquon to protect Jalen Hurts in pass protection, it's very hard for a defense not to be wearing down. I mean, to be pushed around for 3.5 quarters, eventually the floodgates will open, and it already did coming out of halftime. Well, the stamp on this game was a 72-yard run by Saquon Barkley to put him on to 255 rushing yards on the day, breaking LaShawn McCoy's rushing record in a single game, and having over 300 yards from scrimmage. Just imagine that, 300 total yards. And Saquon Barkley by himself outgained the LA Rams defense single-handedly. But again, this Eagles team, ever since the bye week, is not just a Saquon run-first team. I mean, Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown, without Devontae Smith, have been great. Devontae's been battling a hamstring injury, and I thought it was very wise to just rest him, not have him risk any tweaks with the hamstring muscle. We know how finicky those can be. It's a cross-country flight, so we knew it was going to be a heavy dose of AJ Brown. Well, AJ Brown is just so dangerous for this Eagles team. I mean, last year against this Rams team, he tore them up, and yet again he did so against the Rams this year against a similar secondary. AJ just changes things as well. I mean, when AJ is in the lineup this year, the Eagles are actually unbeaten. They have not lost a single game with AJ Brown on the field this year. That changes the game entirely for this Eagles team. And talking about the defense now, I mean, from all 3 levels, we've seen such dominant play. Jalen Carter is wrecking games, eating up double team blocks, freeing up his guys like Josh Sweat or Brandon Graham or Milton Williams for a couple sacks. And that's an altruistic moment for a guy that is a generational talent at the defensive tackle position, but really doing the dirty work so other guys can succeed while he's taking up those blocks. The linebacker position, you have Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond. Two guys have been a dynamic duo at the linebacking position, something we haven't seen out of Philadelphia in quite some time. In the secondary, the star rookie duo with Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who did a really good job on Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. And I mean, there was a sequence where Cooper DeJean was on Cooper Kupp, and it was a classic kind of in and out slot pattern, but Cooper DeJean was right there stride for stride with Kupp. And in another sequence, I saw him guarding Nacua and just played the ball so well, getting his helmet in the way of Nakua's hands so he couldn't make a play on the ball. And Quinion Mitchell just takes a whole side of the field out of the equation. There was just so many times that Matthew Stafford just couldn't even utilize whatever side that Quinion was on because he knew that that guy was going to be blanketed and basically taken out of the game. And even when you throw his way, the gains are very minimal, and if not, it gets to be a pass deflection. And yet again, I think Quinion Mitchell is absolutely worth the Defensive Rookie of the Year. The coverage stats are there. He just needs a couple of interceptions to get the kind of recognition that he deserves. Right now, Jared Verse has 4.5 sacks, and that is what defensive linemen really make their money on. So if defensive backs get paid for making interceptions, well, it's time for Quinion Mitchell to do so, and then he should be a runaway favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But credit again to Vic Fangio. I mean, to go against a talented offense like the LA Rams, who are coming back home and they can really do some damage at SoFi Stadium. But I think the Eagles are really humming on all cylinders and being one of the hottest teams in the NFC. Now, of course, sad news for Brandon Graham. I mean, Philadelphia Eagles great, who unfortunately tore his triceps in this game against the Rams, and he's probably done for the season. But if this is his last game as a Philadelphia Eagle, I mean, he's been hinting at retirement for a few seasons, but it really seems like this is it for him. What a way to go out. He has 2 tackles for loss, a pass breakup, 3 quarterback hits on his fellow 2009 draft classmate in Matthew Stafford, and sacked Stafford another time. And with that sack, he moves to 3rd all-time in Eagles history, moving ahead of Clyde Simmons. He had the most important single play in Eagles history with that strip sack on Tom Brady in Super Bowl 52, and never quite lived up to the first round pedigree, but he was always a gamer, always competed, and was a leader, and is a leader in this Eagles locker room. And despite his absence, this is the first time he suffered a season-ending injury. In 2021, he tore his Achilles in 2 weeks into the season, but this time, I mean, this could be it for Brandon Graham, but he did say, in not really a somber mood in the locker room, that the mission isn't done. And just like what happened 7 years ago when Carson Wentz went down against these very Rams, the Eagles rallied that we're more than this guy, then we can rally around a team and go on a run. And I think the Eagles, this edition of the Eagles, can do so as well, because they have a lot of guys that really look up to Brandon Graham, and I think he will always have a voice in this locker room, whether he's on the field or not. So at this point, he'll be more of a coach, Brandon Graham, at this point, but certainly is something to look out for, because it's a huge loss in the locker room and on the field for the Eagles defense. Saquon's addition to the Philadelphia Eagles is like Babe Ruth when he left the Boston Red Sox to join the New York Yankees, or when Kevin Durant joined the Golden State Warriors. And we're seeing that him being paired behind this great Philadelphia offensive line and this entire team that does absolutely buy into him, he's having one of the most successful years at the running back position, a position that has been undervalued in recent years. Well, the likes of Barkley, CMC, and Derrick Henry have absolutely put the running back position back in center front and focus that they are absolutely valuable pieces to an NFL roster. And to be honest, the Eagles would be in an entirely different state if it wasn't thanks to Saquon Barkley. He is the engine of this offense, and there's been times that Saquon has individually won the Eagles games this season, games that the Eagles had no business in, namely that Saints game early on in the season. He rips off a big gain and turns the tide in the Eagles' favor, and they never let up since. And you know that a team like the Eagles that wear down on you, and eventually knock you out with long runs that we're seeing now from Saquon, that they're just so lethal, especially come to postseason time. Saquon, en route to having 255 yards on the ground and, like I said, over 300 yards from scrimmage, he is now not only leading the league in rushing, but he is on pace to potentially breaking Eric Dickerson's rushing record. Now, he does have that extra game of note, but what Saquon has done for the Eagles has been monumental. And for him to just gel with the Eagles so well, I mean, he was a former division rival, but it's been a seamless fit in year one as a Philadelphia Eagle. You could see him be the first guy to run up and congratulate Kenny Gainwell's first rushing touchdown of the year. You know, Kenny Gainwell has been here in Philadelphia for a few years, since 2021, and has never complained about being a backup running back. He was the backup to Miles Sanders, a Pro Bowler, a backup to DeAndre Swift, another Pro Bowler, and now Saquon Barkley, who is possibly a first-team All-Pro caliber running back. And a lot of that eats into his production, but whenever the bell sounds for his services to come onto the field, Kenny answers that bell. No problems in the locker room, no complaining, nothing. I'm very happy that this team is very much centered around the team rather than individual commodities. And now they're just really gelling as a whole. I mean, they're arguably one of the hottest teams in the league, and I'm really excited to see how this season unfolds. I mean, it definitely feels like there's something special brewing, but take it week by week. I mean, this team has to respond. Yet again, they have a tough game against Baltimore on the road. But after that, they don't have to get on another plane. I mean, they're going to be at the crib in Philadelphia for the last 5 weeks of the season. So speaking of the NFC West, we had a battle for the top place in the division between the Cardinals and Seahawks. Now, the Cardinals have been relatively hot. Ever since they started 2-4, they won 4 straight and were in first place in the division at the start of Sunday. The Seahawks have been up and down, and they're very hard to really figure out who the hell they are. They have wins against the Falcons and the 49ers, but then they lose games to the New York Giants at home. I've been hard on Geno, especially with the turnovers. There's been a lot of bad interception this year, decision making, and he had another bad interception against the Cardinals, but the defense really did their job. I mean, a pick six by Kobe Bryant, not this Kobe Bryant, but number 8 of the Seattle Seahawks, who changed the tide in this game. I mean, this new brand under Jonathan Gannon for the Arizona Cardinals is very physical, run first, physical type of football. Well, I think the Seahawks outbullied the Cardinals, basically. I mean, they didn't have gaudy stats running the ball, but I thought they pushed Arizona around a little bit in this game, especially being at home. And it's getting colder now, and there's definitely precipitation out there in the Pacific Northwest. That a team led by Kyler Murray, who's been dubbed kind of this finesse type of player that can't handle extreme contact, that you can get after him, and that definitely rattled him in this game. Now, absolutely, they can rebound and get back on track, but it definitely was a disappointing performance for the Cardinals. And with the Seahawks, I think this is definitely another big win for them, for their chances to win this division. Now, with this win, and coupled with the tiebreaker that they own against the Atlanta Falcons, who've been slumping as of late, they have risen now from out of the postseason to the 3 seed in the NFC playoff race. Their schedule going forward is going to be a bunch of divisional battles as well. They'll still play these Cardinals yet again later in Arizona. They owe a trip down to LA to play the LA Rams, and they'll host the Green Bay Packers. But I think we'll learn a lot about Seattle going forward, but I'm really excited to see what Seattle has cooked up under Mike Macdonald. I know moral victories aren't really a thing in pro sports, especially in the NFL, but I think the Carolina Panthers can absolutely take their 30-27 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs as a moral victory. They pushed the 2-time defending champions to the brink of overtime. I mean, they were tied with under 2 minutes left, and we're seeing a gradual improvement in Bryce Young and his development in the NFL. Remember, on opening day, he looked awful. His first throw of the season was an interception, and they lost 47-10. And you're thinking about him being a bust. He doesn't belong in this league. And I'm seeing some things where he's able to zip a pass on a tight slant when there's good coverage on the receiver. And maybe it's too late for Bryce in Carolina because Carolina is more of a mess than Bryce Young is. But we can also see that Bryce Young absolutely has something of value. And whether it's with Carolina or another team in the future remains to be seen. But absolutely, I think that Bryce Young came out to play. And the Carolina Panthers came out to play. A defense that's known to be historically bad. I mean, they lost Derek Brown in the early part of this year, and he's been one of their good pieces on defense. But without him, they've been a train wreck, and they're one of the worst defensive units in the NFL. What they needed to do in the second half, I mean, there were countless times that they got stops and let the Panthers offense get back into the game. And if you think about how this game was won, the Kansas City Chiefs defense absolutely won it for them in the first half with getting stops in the red zone, forcing 3 field goal attempts. I mean, if you think about any one of those field goals turned into touchdowns, it could have been one of the most historic upsets in recent memory. I think about a team that has fewer than 4 wins beating the 2-time defending champions. And remember, coming into this, that Kansas City was 9-1, reeling off of their first loss against the Buffalo Bills, but they were a 11-point favorite leading up into kickoff, and that is a get-right game, evidently. I mean, that is a team that you're going up against. You have a distinct advantage, head coaching, quarterback, defensive unit, but I think this is definitely more concerns for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, of course, this is the regular season, and last year they can be as terrible as they want in the regular season. They just need a couple things to go their way in the postseason, like we saw last year, and they're hoisting a Lombardi yet again. So I think all these concerns are valid, but again, we have to see if these actually show up in the playoffs, because they're 10-1, and they still have some concerns across the board. Offensively, still looks like a work in progress, and Isaiah Pacheco could be on the mend soon, so that's going to assure that the running back position is going to be a healthy unit come postseason time. But one thing is that the defense has definitely taken a step back. Now, we talked about last week where they lost L'Jarius Sneed to the offseason where he was traded to the Tennessee Titans, and in the process, Trent McDuffie, who is held down the fort in the nickel and sometimes playing outside, that the L'Jarius Sneed replacements at least haven't been up to that kind of standard. Where he was an all-pro caliber player, his replacements just haven't done that this year in Spagnuolo's defense. And for a guy like Bryce Young to take this Chiefs defense to the wire, have 2 touchdown drives in the second half where they outscored them 18-7, I believe. That's a big moral victory for a Panthers team that came into this year with so many questions about Dave Canales, ownership, their quarterback belonging in this league. And there's still a month and a half left to be played in this NFL season, so, I mean, things could very well come off the rails. But overall, for this Panthers team that has been surrounded by loss, controversy, whatever have you, the month of November has been relatively kind to them, where they've actually improved their play, and we're seeing development in all 3 major phases in the organization. For the Chiefs, I expect on Black Friday for the Chiefs to finally beat down a team. I mean, the first matchup with the Las Vegas Raiders, they had their biggest margin of victory, and that was only, I think, 13 points at that time. Not a true blowout, but a comfortable victory. And if that isn't the get-right game and they somehow struggle against a team that's now very obviously tanking and has just lost Gardner Minshew to a season-ending collarbone injury, that they should have no problems against Desmond Ridder and a very decimated Raiders team. So I expect them to blow them out and then continue to be on the track for the 1 seed, because their upcoming schedule, especially in December, definitely gets a lot harder. They play the Broncos a second time. They play the Chargers a second time, along with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with not having the home field advantage tiebreaker against Buffalo in your back pocket, they are very vulnerable to losing that 1 seed, and they only need to slip up once for Buffalo to come in and seize it, because Buffalo could have their division wrapped up by the time they take the field in the second week of December, which is already a huge advantage when you've taken care of your division, and then basically you're looking at playoff positioning at that point. We already said that the Bills pose some threats, and home field advantage is going to be very pivotal to see who ends up going to the Super Bowl when it's all said and done this year, but yet again, a lot to unfold for the Chiefs and the Bills, but so far, still some concerns I'm seeing with the Chiefs, but nothing to be concerned of just yet until it comes to the postseason. Injuries continue to bite the San Francisco 49ers. We saw coming into this game that Brock Purdy and Nick Bosa were out for a potentially juicy matchup in a playoff rematch against the Green Bay Packers, but without your starting quarterback and your star defensive end, it was going to be pretty much curtains for any chances that the 49ers had in this game. And they stand at 5-6. The Packers beat the San Francisco 49ers 38-10. And at this point, the Niners are probably cooked, right? I mean, they're 5-6, and I think their only real pathway to getting into the postseason is winning the NFC West, which is still in play. But the problem is they've lost 3 divisional games already. The other teams have only lost a maximum of 2. They're really at least healthier than the 49ers at this point. I mean, yes, Christian McCaffrey is back, but is looking like a shell of himself. And honestly, if the season doesn't go that well going forward, I mean, it's better just to rest Christian McCaffrey, punt this season. And at this point, that's is the cost of success. You have so many talented pieces, but it's an expensive older roster now that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, they really focus on defensive line and skills positions, which is good. It's part of the reason why they've been an NFC powerhouse as of late. But you know, the other teams like the Chiefs, for example, they really focus also on the offensive line, something outside of Trent Williams, something we haven't seen out of this 49ers organization. So I definitely have some concerns about the 49ers going forward. They could still be that very, very dark horse that somehow snatches the NFC West. They're still not mathematically eliminated, and they still have that puncher's chance. I mean, they're ungodly talented, but at some point you got to think about these injuries catching up to them, and there's only a point where there are 3 other teams competing for this division, and the odds are that the 49ers are on their way out of the 2024 playoffs. The Washington Commanders are now on a 3-game losing streak. I mean, at the beginning of the month, they were 7-2, but then 2 losses against 2 of Pennsylvania's finest football teams, and then coupled with the loss to the Dak Prescott-less Dallas Cowboys. I think there's some concerns arising out of Washington where we're seeing Jaden Daniels being affected by this rib injury. Don't know the severity of it, but there's still some concerns there. Play calling with Cliff Kingsbury hits a wall when the season drags on. We saw it with his days at Texas Tech. We saw it with the Arizona Cardinals and him coaching Kyler Murray. And we're seeing Jaden Daniels kind of regress after having such a good run in the middle part of the year that Offensive Rookie of the Year is very much open now, but I'm not going to say that Jaden Daniels is trash or anything like that. I just think that his play hasn't been good in recent weeks, and Bo Nix has ascended since. And you're seeing how these 2 teams are trending. One team is trending on the up and up at 7-5. The other team is trending down at 7-5. And it's not all on the quarterbacks. I mean, Austin Seibert didn't do Jaden Daniels any favors in this game, missing an extra point when they could have tied. I think he actually missed 2 extra points in this game that could have very well been the difference in this game. Washington is definitely coming undone. And once when they had an opportunity to win this division, but now they're very much on the edges of the wild card race right now. I think that they'll make some adjustments and we'll see something turn around for Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, but certainly late game execution is really, really important. I mean, Dan Quinn was doing such a good job, but you know, this guy is known to have the biggest Super Bowl collapse in NFL history. His last showing as a DC for the Dallas Cowboys in last year's wildcard round was not the best showing either. He got out of town, got a head coaching gig, did what he needed to do. But remember, it all comes down to 3 facets of the game: special teams, offense, and defense. And we're seeing definitely some deficiencies across the board for the Washington Commanders. Now, for Dallas, definitely a good win. I mean, you stop some of the bleeding, but you think about the lost cause at this point. I mean, there's no way that this Cowboys team is going to rally to somehow get into the postseason. So you had some chances, but to tank this season, lose as many games as possible, but now just this one win is going to not only kill your top 5 draft positioning, but even take you out of the top 10. And as bad as the Cowboys have been, the Giants look worse, and these two are going to play each other on Thursday in an afternoon matinee game on Thanksgiving. And most likely, I think the Cowboys will win that game too, which basically eliminates them from having a top 10 pick. Now, there's probably a chance that they could get a top 8 if they play their cards right, but there's a lot of bad teams this year in the NFL. I mean, so many 2-win teams in this league that it's a very hard pathway for the Cowboys maybe having 4 or 5 victories to even get a top 10 pick. So even when they're trying to tank, they can't even do that right. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Shout out to Joy for editing this podcast. And thank you again for the new subscribers. We are on the way to 200 subscribers by the end of the year, and would mean a massive difference if you guys like these videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And remember, if you want to get clips from today's episode, we have that here on YouTube, as well as the Daniel Jones release video. Go check that out. And if you want to enjoy clips on TikTok, we got that for you too. Or you want to get the whole episode as an audio experience, we got that for you on Spotify. I'll link everything in the description. And happy Thanksgiving to all who celebrate in the US. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everyone.